requesting whatever happened in Bangladesh, the miscreants they attacked and they also severely beaten, and one devotee expired and two devotees we have heard that another devotee also expired, and some of them they are also severely beaten and they are all, put in the hospital. And so we are requesting all the human beings to protest, and we need the justice and they should get exemplary punishment.
Secularism in general is very specific in French. It's called laïcité, and it's a different notion than just the separation of state and church. It's almost an ideal, an ethics, where religion has to be extremely discreet and that cannot be proposed as a political platform. So very different from American, politics, for instance. And I think French society in general has a real difficulty with spirituality and religion.
We had a future here, but now we don't anymore. I have lost all hope, not only for us, but for anyone who lives in Afghanistan. There is no hope anymore.
हमारा सबर का पैमाना लबरेज हो चुका है हमारे बच्चे हमारे माए हमारी बच्चियां हमारे
Now our patience is running out. Our children, mothers, sisters and the elderly are asking how far this unknown goes. Now the drama of the unknown will not continue. We will expose what is unknown in this terrorist incident, if you do not find it.
From a family that came to this church on that day. So the mass has ended. We were just waiting for the Reverend Father to get down from the pulpit and walk out of the church before we follow as a member. When we heard the sound of the explosion, so I thought it was the area boys that were fighting. Later on, I discovered that it was terrorists.
Trouver la croix gammée qui était à ce niveau-là, juste en dessous la mezouza. Bon.
We found the swastika here, just below the mezouza. The police came to take fingerprints, and then we erased it because we didn't want it to remain.
मुझे लग रहा है ये ढोंग है ये जो कहते हैं कि सेक्युलरिज्म का ढोंग है ये जो कश्मीरियत का ढोंग है भाईचारे का ढोंग है
I feel that all this is a drama of secularism. Kashmiriyat and brotherhood, as I cannot see any of these. The killings that are taking place are not tolerable at all. We have been seeing that in this 1.5 months, the killings have become very rampant, and the targeted killings are aimed towards either only one community or security forces.
Ideological extremism and religious intolerance have become a global reality. In recent times, there has been a sharp increase in religious tensions around the world. These range from Islamic extremists waging global jihad and past struggles between Sunni and Shia Muslims in South Asia to the persecution of Rohingya in Myanmar to Uyghurs in China, and outbreaks of violence between Christians and Muslims across Africa. fact, according to Pew Research Center in 2018, more than a quarter of the world's countries experienced a high incidence of hostilities motivated by religious hatred, mob violence related to religion, terrorism, and harassment of women for violating religious codes. How is it that religion and faith, which ideally should endorse love, peace and harmony, are today associated with intolerance and violent aggression? Does religious diversity lead to civil conflict? Let's find out answers to these questions and more.
We want justice! We want justice! We want justice!
A spike in religious violence is a global phenomenon. It affects every religious group. Several reports indicate that mass killings and other atrocities are increasing in countries, both affected and not affected by war alike. Even Hindus have been subjected to various atrocities in many countries. June 21st. While the world was celebrating International Yoga Day, these visuals emerged from Maldives, leaving everyone shocked. Police were forced to use tear gas and pepper spray to control a crowd of people who disrupted a yoga event organized by the Indian High Commission in the capital Male. The mob stormed the stadium where more than 150 people had gathered. They attacked participants and vandalized the property. Islam is the state religion in Maldives, and the protesters brandished placards claiming that yoga was against the tenets of Islam. The rising tide of radicalization is threatening the island nation. India too is in the throes of a crisis of intolerance. With a population of more than 1.3 billion, India is a religiously pluralistic and multi-ethnic democracy. It's the world's largest democracy. The Indian Constitution has granted religious freedom to every citizen. It emphasizes equal rights, protects liberties of religion and speech. Yet, the current landscape tells a different story. In recent days, India has been rocked by violence in 14 states. A controversial statement on Prophet Muhammad has raised many serious questions, including this one. Can the right to protest be allowed to descend into anarchy? Let's look at a timeline of events. Nupur Sharma, who was then a spokesperson of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, made derogatory comments about Prophet Muhammad during a television channel debate on the Gyanvapi mosque issue. Thousands of people took to the streets. Soon, the protests turned violent. Protesters pelted stones, set vehicles on fire, and even threw petrol bombs at the police. All this happened even when the government suspended Nupur Sharma. She is now facing legal action in many states.
On the issue of the Prophet, in the controversy over those offensive remarks, I think, look, let me just emphasize what we've been saying. And I think by now you're pretty clear about what we've been saying. Let me just say it for the record. I think we've made it pretty clear that the tweets and comments do not reflect the views of the government. This has been conveyed to our interlocutors, as also the fact that action has been taken by the concerned quarters against those who made the comments and tweets.
Her remark drew sharp reactions from countries like Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bahrain. As the controversy snowballed, the suspended leader issued an apology, stating that a fellow panelist's remarks about Mahadev, a Hindu god, caused her anguish, and as a result, she responded as an angry person. She also withdrew her statement unconditionally. While mocking any religion should have no place in a civilized society, it is also true that two wrongs do not make a right. In a multicultural democracy like India, it is important for all to respect each other's religion and sentiments. This leads us to the next question. Whether the Muslim religious leaders who reacted furiously to Nupur Sharma's controversial statement should not have also opposed the remarks made on Mahadev. Had they done so, is it possible that the protesting mob's demonstration would not have been this violent? The Muslim community has every right to be angry and outraged over Nupur Sharma's remarks. They are entitled to peaceful protests. But when their protests turn violent, the law has to act against those who indulged in violence. Meanwhile, Nupur Sharma continues to get threats. The government had to give her police protection. Those asking for the beheading of Nupur Sharma or sending her death threats also have no place in a civilized society. The law must act against them equally. If Nupur Sharma is found guilty, she will be punished in due course. It should also be noted that in a democracy, the citizens have fundamental rights, but they also have fundamental duties. In the Nupur Sharma episode, we saw protesters damage public property and indulge in violence, targeting and destroying homes. It is unacceptable, much like Ms. Sharma's remarks. This was the house where Javed Mohammed, a Prayagraj-based politician, lived. Civic authorities demolished the house, citing illegal construction. They did so after a violent protest erupted in Prayagraj over Nupur Sharma's controversial remark. Javed Mohammed was accused of being one of the alleged masterminds of violence and arson. The visuals are shocking, and critics are accusing the government of being anti-minority. However, this is not the first time the bulldozer demolition drive in India's most populous state has made headlines. In 2020, the house of gangster Vikas Dubey, accused of killing 8 policemen, was razed down. Back then, some political parties had accused the government of being anti-Brahmin, as the slain gangster was an upper caste Hindu. Today, the same government is being accused of being anti-minority. A plea has been filed in India's apex court against the drive. Those opposing the demolition drive argue that the Uttar Pradesh government's action is extrajudicial and violates the principle of natural justice to target one community, the Muslims. However, the Prayagraj Development Authority claims that the demolition is in accordance with law. The house was built without getting the map or the blueprint of the house approved. The municipal authority says they served a notice to the accused 1 month before taking action, giving the owners sufficient time to present their case. Critics slam these claims. They say the illegal construction wasn't the trigger. It was an excuse to target a particular community. As expected, the issue has exploded on social media. A section believes The bulldozer is being used as an intimidation tool for the Muslim community. On the other hand, a significant number of people see it as a tool of justice, a strong deterrent for antisocial elements. Is there more to this story than meets the eye? The Muslim community in India is the most backward in terms of education as well as socio-economic condition. Let's look at some statistics. Muslims comprise 14.2% of the Indian population. But according to National Crime Information Bureau data from 2019, 16.6% of convicts, 18.7% of under trials, and 35.8% of detainees in Indian prisons are Muslims. According to the Sachar Committee report, 1/4 of Muslim children in the age group of 6 to 14 years have either never attended school or are dropouts. For children above the age of 17 years, the educational attainment of Muslims at matriculation is 17% as against the national average at 26%. The connection between poor levels of education and the rate of unemployment and crime are easy to understand. But why are we listing out these socio-economic indicators while talking about bulldozer politics? Because these figures tell us why Indian Muslims see themselves as victims, as a marginalized population. To understand how divisive politics is driving increasing communal violence in India, one has to revisit the past. For a long time after independence, India was ruled by parties who claimed to be custodians of secular politics. The word secular was incorporated in the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. Many political pundits think this was a gimmick for using the minorities as a vote bank. Secularism became a form of political correctness. Sadly, in electoral India, it became an invidious weapon. Political parties began to placate minorities electorally, violating the majoritarian sense of fairness. Who can forget the famous statement of 2006 by then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, saying that minorities, particularly Muslims, had the first claim on all available resources of the country.
We will have to devise innovative plans to ensure that minorities, particularly the Muslim minority, are empowered to share equitably in the fruits of development. They must have the first claim on our resources.
Political analysts believe such incidents over a few decades led to a feeling of insecurity amongst the majority community. It led to anger and resentment. It was this feeling by the silent majority that was converted into votes in 2014, bringing the nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party into power. But what is the silent majority? It was a term widely used by US President Richard Nixon in the late 1960s. In the wake of anti-Vietnam War protests, it referred to a large group of Americans who supported the war but stayed out of politics. Nixon utilized the phrase in order to win their support. Many political pundits see the emergence of nationalist leaders such as Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Uttar Pradesh's Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath as a counter-result of vote bank politics. It can be said that they also enjoy the support of the silent majority. In this case, it was the Hindu voters. In modern India, the vote bank politics of the so-called secular parties is fading. But it is a testing time. The Indian democracy is going through a reset. The Nupur Sharma incident has stirred up a hornet's nest. The question is, will the country emerge through the crisis as a stronger more resilient and responsible democracy.